Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap it, tap that screen.
Well,
Yeah,
some
tap it,
DX
tap it. Game gremlins coming, let's go. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. Let's see those team stickers
BL0SSONDXZ
flow.
says hopefully not many people today look like
Benjamin is in the house.
Game gremlins on the scene.
The Son BXE says treasure box remind.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says Blossom in the house.
Now tap that screen. Now tap
We
that
would be
screen.
honored if you would join us.
Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Welcome gremlins to
Grumps
the
says
game
welcome one and all.
Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcome in guys, settle down, grab your heartbeat, share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, it's your warm-up routine. Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene.
BLO Sun VXE says at Grumps hello.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Gang gremlins coming, let's go. Now tap that screen, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow.
Grumps says it gives me the Chinese higher.
Gang gremlins on the scene.
BL Some DXZ says at
Now
FOFO
tap
Star
that screen.
and Usis.
Grumps says it FOFOSTAR heart hands hey.
Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen.
BLO Sun VXE says at Grumps who are these people?
Grumps says at BL0SM.VXZ they are players like yourself.
BLO Son VXD says at Grumps I identify as an alien. BLO Son VXD says at Fafastar she's not a player, she's a model.
Gaga Grumps says who's ready to play Wordle. Grumps says at BL0SM.VXZ and that's perfectly fine.
BLO Som VXE says at Grumps View.
The man says, can I get a follow by ever 1BC? I have a broken leg, and 3 for begging all.
BL Some VXZ says at the
We
man,
would
no
be
sorry,
honored
I have a broken
if you
arm.
would join us.
Gaga Grumps says we don't do that in Hear the Man. It's against TikTok policy.
Level up.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart blossom. Gaga Grumps says with a quick segue for Blossom's level up.
Well, Creative One says, what did I just miss? Wall.
Look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came
VXZ says that LL Creative One needs.
Grumps says that Ill Creative One can't.
Streak still alive. Wordle solve and you help me fry. Tomorrow we guess, same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
BL Som VXZ says at Fafastar that isn't how we start.
honored if you would join us. We would be honored if you would join us.
The man says at Gaga and Grumps, I did say sorry. So what about WTF?
Gaga Grumps says creative in the house.
Grumps says at FOFOSTAR heart hands we have a method here, patience.
Gaga Grumps says DV in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
BLO Som VXC says at the man no swearing bear.
BL0 Some VXC says at the man behave.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Thanks for the follow.
LL Creative One says hi, leveled up.
BL0SSOMVXZ says that Gaga and Grumps the one and only Y.
BLO Som VXC says at LL Creative One nitrogen monoxide UDIDNT.
BL0 Some VXC says at Fafastar letters actually.
Usam VXZ says I.
It's level up.
Grumps says at Ill Creative One.
You guessed it right. Now here we are, another height. If support was
Gaga
letters,
Grumps says we are starting the day.
this
C.
level's ours. Come out with me now. Green, green.
Geolin One says craft.
Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in.
BL0SSOMVXZ says guesses C.
Shout out chat. New fandom level, streak still alive. Wordle solve and you help me fry. Tomorrow we guess, same time, same chat, same
Gaga Grumps says wow, another level up.
Remember that.
Grumps says at WF10 late and higher.
Gaga Grumps
Thanks for
says
the
creative.
follow.
Geolin One says craft.
DLO Som VXC says that GEOL and one stop spamming.
Nope.
Jellin One says creative.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says at secret no plurals in Wordle.
Jellin One says it not.
Grumps says at today's Wordle tomorrow higher.
Mum says clown.
BLO Som VXC says at the OS Sibao.
Gaga Grumps says TWT in the house, how goes it? Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grumps says at DB higher.
Grumps says at Evie I feel stalked.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with C please MMKH.
BLO Som VXE says at Callum Thompson stop spamming.
Mum says clown.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Geolin.
BLO Som BXE says gosh new people can be a hand.
Moon says see alone.
Thanks for the follow.
It's a Wordle wipeout.
MMKH says share.
Jalen one says crap. Thanks for the follow.
Lost in the grid, can't figure it out.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Jelen1 says craft.
Geolin1 says craft.
Grumps says what a start to the day.
BL Osambi XD says at GOLN1 stop spamming mate or you'll be muted.
DVP says pride.
Mum says share lol.
Gaga Grumps says nice start to the live.
BL0 Some VXD says stare.
Gaga Grumps says pride fits.
Jelen1 says at GOLN1 stop spamming mate or you'll be muted. What did I do?
Mum says taser.
BLO Som VXD says relax.
Gaga Grumps says yellow R&E in need of a home.
Grumps says behave, everyone, calm down.
Blow Som BXE says at GOLN1 is spamming.
Jelen1 says stare.
Gaga Grumps says can't be stare.
Mum says taser.
Jack Wright says stare. BL0SSOMVXZ says that Grumps SRRY.
Mum says not Reeve.
Gaga Grumps says refits.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Mum says it's not even real word.
Gaga Grumps says no it doesn't.
Mum says taser.
Below Som VXE says taser.
Gaga Grumps says auger works.
Mum says meter.
Jelen1 says taser.
Crystal says good morning.
Som VXD says meter.
Grumps says yay.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says we have an trap with no other info. Consonant heavy filter needed.
Jack Wright says meter.
Jelen1 says it's got to be taser.
Gaga Grumps says crystal in the house.
Grumps says at Crystal hello there, need a coffee?
Today's today's Wordle tomorrow says think this has to ease.
Crystal says at Grumps Yepper.
MMKH says it's likely meter. Gaga Grumps says no A for taser. MMKH says I say meter though. Gaga Grumps says meter to test.
Below some VXZ says I know today's Wordly, it's not bad.
Giolin1 says at Ajax to Glorio.
What Creative One says filler.
Wim says sever.
Below some VXZ says sever.
Jelen1 says fever.
Mum says sever or fever.
Losam VXZ says never.
Grump says it's Super Spy Pashita.
Mum says no need for filler.
Gaga Grumps says that's because we don't play today's Wordle in here.
Bielo Some VXZ says rever.
Mum says if you want fills just try safer.
Gaga Grumps says and refer.
Below some VXE says refer.
Well, Creative One says, or furfits too.
BL0SSOMVXZ says fires.
Mum says fever.
Gaga Grumps says fever IIT is. BL0SSOMVXZ says that Alexander Stratton Newton. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
BL Some VXZ says at Alexander Stratton.
Creative One says that was close.
The Elosome BXE says at Grumps Mute Alexander.
Krista says Lord themers are something from both sides.
Gaga Grumps says we got that. Gaga Grumps says do the do for Gaga. Share the live, chat the chat, and shower her with roses and GGs.
Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says Blossom play the game, leave the buttons to Grumps. You're stressing yourself out, Unices Erily. People take time to learn or they leave.
BLO Some VXZ says, when will you add new stickers?
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
BL0SSOMVXZ says at Gaga and Grumps, no, it's cause he said today's Wordle.
Gaga Grumps says I have maximum stickers ATM. Need to work out which to delete.
Mum says today's Wordle was SAF.
Gaga Grumps says I do however have a new song for today lol.
BLOSOMVXE says that Gaga and Grumps delete these ones.
BLOSOMVXE says at MMKHFR.
Gaga Grumps says those are TikToks not mine. I can't delete those lol. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga
Crystal
Grumps
says
says
when
what
do
letter
we
will the
get
wheel
to hear
choose?
it?
Predictions in the chat now.
DLOSOMVXZ says at Gaga and Grumps you can delete them, can you not?
Grumps says at Crystal it's butt related.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. J.
Mum says Jewel.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Crystal says at Grumps so yay I've been waiting long.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Everybody get down! It's a freaking sniper! Ha ha!
A creative one says Grumps Sniper.
Crystal says, oh my god, Grump, I knew it was coming Lamau.
Gaga Grumps says haha Crystal with the last second snipe on Chris, and then Grumps sniped Crystal. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with J please Grumps.
BL Osambi XD says at the dark passenger because clearly not liking.
Grumps says Joker.
Gaga Grumps says you're in number 3 passenger.
Crystal says I was two-fingering that one lol.
Gaga Grumps says you're a joker.
Grumps says at Crystal it had to be done.
Crystal says at Grumps that is good, that is what I was thinking.
Thanks for the follow.
LL Creative 1 says at Grumps.
Grumps says at Crystal TMI.
BLSomVXZ says hater.
Gaga Grumps says we have another trap. Gaga Grumps says timer fits.
Mum says safer.
Crystal says it did, that was great, smile.
Air says Usher.
BL0SSOMVXZ says cadet.
Thanks for the follow.
Blow Zombie XD says Usher.
Mum says payer. Or Creative One says Leia.
Gaga Grumps says safer for fireworks than consonant heavy filter.
DVP says Baker.
Grumps says at Jika what?
MMKH says lever.
DVP says okay.
It says upper.
Well, Creative One says at JIRK, that wasn't very nice.
Mum says cyber.
Mum says hyper.
MMKH says do lever then filler.
BLOSOMVXE says NMMKH to risky.
Crystal says dryer.
Blow Zombie XE says punch for filler.
Crystal says might need to fillers. Blossom VXZ says punch for filler.
Mum says glyph is good.
Gaga Grumps says I'm going glyph for filter. MMKH says newer is possible. Gaga Grumps says okay, lots of options removed at least.
Mum says never or
We would be
newer, I
honored
think.
if you would join us.
A says under can tell us.
BLO Zombie XZ says newer.
Blossom VXE says never newer and upper.
Peanuts here!
Grumps says at precious _ higher.
Mum says can't be upper.
DLO some VXC says under newer and never.
Mum says no need for filler.
Precious says under newer never.
Blossom VXZ says need another filler.
Mum says NVM.
Mum says filler.
Air says wait.
Precious says hi.
Crystal says now all E and U words.
MMKH says under is okay.
Mum says just send under TBH.
Precious says unwed filler.
Gaga Grumps says under doesn't tell us if it's newer or never though.
Ash says wed can.
Gaga Grumps says good shout Precious.
Precious says udder.
As says uter then.
Mum says udder.
Crystal says udder.
Gaga Grumps says see other wasn't even on the radar lol.
Precious says at Ash there's no end.
Grumps says utterly well played. Grumps says at Logan it's also 6 letters.
LL Creative One says at Logan and 6 letters too.
Gaga Grumps says and there was your masterclass in filters for the day lol.
Shout! It's Cooper! Hey! Shine, 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 da, 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 shine, shine. It's Cooper! Whoa! Shine, shine, da, da,
Grumps says at Marcus I dug deep, just for you.
wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? He's a corgi, don't you know? His name is Cooper, watch him go. Wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With the wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With the wiggle butt.
Good game.
Crystal says W. Cooper.
The creative one says like it.
Mum says next letter B.
Gaga Grumps says welcome to your earworm.
Crystal says I love it.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Level up.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Thanks for the follow.
It's a L.
Thanks for the
Gaga Grumps says with a quick segue for this message for Precious.
Guessed it right. Now here we are, another height. If support was letters, you'd spell wow. This level's ours. Come out with me now. Green,
Grumps says at Crystal we should have a dance contest. We post the funniest clip for one of the songs.
support came in. Guess it's snap. Level unlocked. Shout out chat. New fandom level streak still alive. Wordle solved and you help me fry. Tomorrow we guess same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Crystal says at Grumps right.
Gaga Grumps says, what letter will the wheel choose?
Good game.
Predictions in the chat now.
Good game. Good game.
Precious says I was dancing along Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says, that's what I like to hear. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. F.
Grumps says knew it, we need a dance off.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon?
Gaga Grumps says, want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grumps says at Mimic Farmer 235 highest.
Gaga Grumps says, I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says, your word starting with F, please, Precious.
Precious says four, please.
Gaga Grumps says, foyer you got.
Precious says fence.
Gaga Grumps says wheel chose the right letter.
Crystal says feast.
DVP says feast. LL Creative 1 says flame. Gaga Grumps says and E needs a home.
Mum says fudge.
Gaga Grumps says no plurals in Wordle. Gaga Grumps says and the relief that it isn't another word.
Mum says, why is TTS so delighted?
Precious says fable.
Mum says false.
MMKH says fable or false.
Crystal says false.
If you would join us.
The creative one says false.
Gaga Grumps says 4 letters, we have ourselves a partial anagram. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart Bevlu.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga grumps says, are you ready?
It's a performance and
Beverly says you're welcome.
she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee.
Gaga grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Shout! It's Cooper!
Gaga grumps says I saw a corgi.
It's Cooper!
We would be honored if you would join us.
Wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? He's a corgi, don't you know? His name is Cooper, watch him go! Wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt.
Gaga grumps says Reyes in the house, thanks for doing your daily
Wiggle
heart.
butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what with the wiggle butt. That cute and fluffy puffball tail, Cooper, we do, yeah. Wiggle butt, just a little mud with a wiggle butt. Gremlin say what with a wiggle butt.
Good game. 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 Good game.
Gaga
Good game.
grumps says let's play Wordle.
Good game.
Gaga grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Crystal says I have to go see you all later.
Gaga grumps says have a good day Crystal, thanks for the wiggles.
Grump says at Crystal work calls. Darn Mondays. Be well.
Bevlu says by Crystal.
Gaga grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Crystal says thank you both.
Race to the top, like a thorn.
Crystal says a Beverly vibe there.
Like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned.
Gaga grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlin's hearts be flying like a thorn. Gremlin's defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grump says he'll win the race to get first dibs. Grump says that Vigil Darudi Radio has no G.
Mum says bro how.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with G, please Rai.
Rory says glare.
Gaga Grumps says glare you got.
MMKH says snack. Grump says at MMKH with no regard for one's fingertips.
Gaga Grumps says a green A moved into number 3 Wordle Street. DVP says Shaq. Gaga Grumps says Shaq fits.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says no plurals in Wordle.
MMKH says for me when it stopped it said sent for 100 likes.
MMKH says boast. Gaga Grumps says yellow S in need of a home. Raya Rai says toast.
Num says boast.
Gaga Grumps says toast works.
MMKH says brew.
Rory says wow.
Fireworks for Gaga. It's a performance and
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3.
she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga.
Bevan says WD.
Within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to
LL Creative 1 says on a roll.
anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps
Good
says
game.
what was that on my head?
Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Well, Creative One says that Gaga and Grumps party pony.
Gaga Grumps says a party pony. How fun.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says Oscar in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Bacon says, hey there Gaga.
Benjamin is in the house.
Grump says Oscar and eggs.
Mum says what if whoever predicts the wheel gets to choose the word?
Gaga Grumps says eggs is in the house. Gaga Grumps says I'm thinking of that MMKH. I have an on the nose song planned for it.
MKH says that Gaga and Grumps let's go.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting words. Send a ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins don't tire like a thorn. Hearts be flying like a thorn. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grump says a Dilly better win the race then.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with F, please, Rai Rai. Raya Rai says feast. Gaga Grumps says feast you got. MMKH says duvet. Gaga Grumps says T lives at number 5 and E needs to call home. Gaga Grumps says duvet fits. Gaga Grumps says we end in vet.
Mum says rivet. Precious says pivot.
A creative one says covet.
Nim says covet.
Rory says event.
Thanks for the follow.
Precious says covet.
A creative one says covet.
Gaga Grumps says do we get fireworks for the 3rd time in a row?
Mum says covet is better. MMKH says NVM.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says will not roll.
Explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
Well, creative one says great.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Rory says, oh my god, I'm really lagging.
Grumps says at Brandon.mccall.440.
Good game.
Creative one says good day.
Well, creative one says at Rory, yes it is.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says the great thing is, the next letter will be AQ.
Ding, 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 ding. That's right, nigga.
Grumps says it's off.
Gaga Grumps says SOF on the nose. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon?
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says at the Patrick 248 what the what?
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with V, please, it seems. Gaga Grumps says if your word is being filtered, try, I'd like word. Gaga Grumps says thanks for the shield.
Precious says edit underscore seems what's your word.
Creative One says voice.
Gaga Grumps says it seems you still here.
Grumps says edit underscore seems your word starting with V.
Gaga Grumps says going with voice.
Precious says choke.
Gaga Grumps says E lives at number 50 and C need homes.
Rare says score.
Gaga Grumps says Hymus LHYN didn't see you come in.
Well, Creative One says chose.
Gaga Grumps says close fits.
Oscar says choke.
Gaga Grumps says all letters home. Gaga Grumps says choke works.
Pressure says chore.
Creative One says chore.
Rory says chore.
Gaga Grumps says must be chore.
Oscar says our fireworks streak over.
Welcome, Gremlins.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
To the game grotto. Welcoming guys.
Thanks for the follow.
Settle down. Grab your heartbeat. Share us round.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Game Gremlins on the scene. Game Gremlins on the
The
scene.
creative one says we still got a ring, so it's all good.
Game Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says nothing lasts forever Oscar lol.
Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. Game Gremlins coming, let's go.
Good game.
Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Gang Gremlins on the scene.
Level up.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the GG's precious. Gaga Grumps says insane to the house with the roses.
Grumps says it precious underscore.
It's a
Level up.
Gaga Grumps says a quick segue for this level up for precious.
Now here we are, another height. If support was letters, you'd spell wow. This level's ours, come out with me now. Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guess it snapped. Level unlocked, shout out chat. New fandom level, streak still alive. Wordle solved and you helped me fry. Tomorrow we guess
We would be honored if you would join us.
Remember that.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart eggs. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says Q of course.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. V again. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Precious says Vatch.
Grumps says at PK win the race then.
Precious says, oh the taps, I always forget.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grump says that Precious underscore can always do the crown shortcut.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Says I'm sure my likes don't register lol.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with V, please creative.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says it seems to randomly choose peeps to throttle St. Lol.
Grump says it's Summer higher.
Benjamin is in the house.
Summer says at Grumps hey.
Rare says that I definitely was tapping and I never got on the list.
Gaga Grumps says Summer in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Well, Creative One says video.
Gaga Grumps says video you got.
Summer says at Gaga and Grumps, hey, how are you?
Gaga Grumps says I'm good tar. You.
Says evade.
Gaga Grumps says yellow V and E in need of homes.
Says no.
Creative One says lever.
Says no D.
Gaga Grumps says can't be evade.
Rare says shave.
Rare says no E.
Gaga Grumps says lever fits. Summer says ye can't go there.
Exam Bacon says he doesn't go there.
Gaga Grumps says nope, lever doesn't fit.
Eggs and Bacon says shave fits.
Well, Creative One says solve.
Gaga Grumps says okay, salve does fit lol.
Says we.
Gaga Grumps says E moved into number 5. V still homeless.
Grump says it's auxiliary higher.
Rare says Beview.
Gaga Grumps says thanks Rock Talk.
Says review.
Gaga Grumps says what is Beview?
Rare says typo R.
Gaga Grumps says that's better lol.
Grumps says at max 12 higher.
Rare says use.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Rare says yes.
It's summer for Miss Amy. Explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place.
Gaga Grumps says and Rai brought back the fireworks.
Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy.
Gaga Grumps says fireworks for Rai.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
and that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Thanks for the follow!
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says hi Max and yes.
Says love the music.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. What letter will the
Grumps
wheel
says
choose?
that. Jack right
Predictions
higher.
in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. G.
Grumps says at ERIN higher.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says at GC.Louis top of the day to you.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned like a thorn. Fingers on fire like a thorn.
Grumps says at G0 real for Z, 3 higher.
Hearts be flying like a thorn. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat now, let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with G, please creative. Gaga Grumps says that's how it rolls GC lol.
The creative one says try Grum.
Grump says at gc.louis fastest finger first.
Gaga Grumps says Grumps is in the grid. Gaga Grumps says and he's a whiteout.
The creative one says more.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Exand Bacon says belly.
Exand Bacon says belly.
Rare says beach.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says how do you know about his belly?
Rare says, oh my god.
Gaga Grumps says it's a double.
Creative one says double wipeout.
Exam Bacon says, let's get a triple wipeout.
Summer says stink. Summer says stink.
Rore says shown.
Gaga Grumps says all grey letters in the starting word max.
Exam Bacon says stink fits.
Summer says stink. Grump says at max 12 not a single letter is yellow or green.
DVP says watch.
Gaga Grumps says stink does.
Exam Bacon says tooth.
Summer says what is happening where all the letters.
Grump says at guess who.
Exand Bacon says tooth.
Gaga Grumps says yellow tea in need of a home. 14 letters wiped from the game.
DVP says watch.
Rore says hatch.
Exand Bacon says tooth is a good shout.
Gaga Grumps says watch works.
LL Creative One says later.
Exand Bacon says tooth.
Rare says tooth.
Gaga Grumps says yep, I think it has to be tooth. 2 double letters. Gaga Grumps says there is a yellow T Max.
Eggs and Bacon says Gaga stole my Wordle info.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says I'm so sorry eggs. Didn't want to commit to doubles at that point.
Don't let her lose! Grumps is on the buttons! Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly!
Gaga Grumps says do the D for Gaga. Share the live chat for chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Eggs and Bacon says, will we ever see Grumps?
Gaga Grumps says no, he's a figment of my imagination. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily part while I set up the next word.
Thanks for the follow!
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says hi Leah, welcome. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart Leah.
Eggs and Bacon says wheels landing on Abtef Geikelmoxta.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says wrong eggs. No X on the wheel lol. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. A. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thun. Tap and don't stop, like a thun. Who will be crowned like a thun? Gremlin renowned, like a thun. Fingers on
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
hearts be flying like a thun. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says Rai back on top your word starting with a please Rai.
Laurie says agent.
Gaga Grumps says agent you got. Eggs and bacon says Pearly. Gaga Grumps says yellow A and E in need of homes.
The Creative One says Pearl.
Gaga Grumps says or Pearl cause Pearly is 6 lol.
X and Bacon says my second guesses are amazing.
Eggs and Bacon says, at Gaga and Grumps meant that lol.
Gaga Grumps says they would be if you could count lol.
The Creative One says eggs, we were thinking the same.
Gaga Grumps says but yes amazing. Eggs and Bacon says top you.
Eggs and Bacon says told you.
Grumps says pedal.
Eggs and Bacon says, I'll need spelling lessons please. Rare says pedal.
O Creative One says pedal.
Gaga Grumps says pedal for fireworks for eggs.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Rare says fireworks for Gaga.
It's a performance LA. Explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga.
Good game.
Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy. As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet.
Eggs and Bacon says fireworks for eggs and bacon.
Okay, smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Eggs and Bacon says one more game than I'm gone BC phones overheating.
Eggs and Bacon says, and burning my hands.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says bad phone. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Eggs and Bacon says at Gaga and Grumps it's an iPhone on charge for UL.
Eggs and Bacon says at Gaga and Grumps it's an iPhone on charge for UL.
Well, Creative One says at Eggs and Bacon, are you cooking eggs and bacon on your phone too?
Gaga Grumps says lol.
Eggs and Bacon says, at LL Creative One may as well be.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. H. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned like a thorn.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Eggs and Bacon says, enjoy tapping guys, I would if my hands wasn't burning.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says at Eggs and Bacon, where's the dedication?
Gaga Grumps says burn for Gaga.
Eggs and Bacon says at Grumps, I need my fingers lol for multiples things.
Grumps says at Eggs and Bacon, let's leave it at that.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with H, please white heart. What do I call you lol?
Eggs and Bacon says that Grumps was only thinking about cooking eggs. And Bacon can't do that without fingers.
Oh, Creative One says house.
Gaga Grumps says ha, very apt. Heart you hot.
Eggs and Bacon says, can I have second guess?
Grumps says at Eggs and Bacon.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Lost in the grid, can't figure
Eggs and Bacon says dingy.
LL Creative One says it has no heart today.
Oh no.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says dingy fits.
Oh, Creative One says pinky.
Eggs and Bacon says get ready for wipeout.
Thanks for the follow.
Well, Creative One says not quite.
Gaga Grumps says yellow eye in need of a home. 9 letters wiped from the game.
Rare says music.
Creative 1 says stick.
Gaga Grumps says nearly eggs. Gaga Grumps says can't be stick.
Exam Bacon says flick works.
Gaga Grumps says music works. Gaga Grumps says you and I moved into 2 and 4.
Rory says pupil.
Gaga Grumps says no C for Cupid.
Well, Creative 1 says pupil.
Gaga Grumps says pupil is a good shout.
Rory says yes.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
Well, Creative 1 says buy eggs.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Exam Bacon says bye-bye everyone, no more wipeouts lol.
Gaga Grumps says buy eggs.
It's do or die, only in 3. A pretty sky.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga.
Grumps says at Eggs and Bacon, have a good evening.
Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says geez we are starting with A. V again. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Well, Creative 1 says V again. Let's pick one for it. Law.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon. Gremlins don't tire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with V please GC.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Jack in the house thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says viral you got.
Jack Wright says at Gaga and Grumps welcome.
Gaga Grumps says Yellow A in need of a home. Gaga Grumps says no L for plain.
The creative one says a bath.
Lil Creative One says about.
Jack Wright says above.
Gaga Grumps says no V for above.
LL Creative One says about.
Gaga Grumps says about fits. Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless tea.
Jack Wright says tox.
Gaga Grumps says stank works. Gaga Grumps says S and A moved into 1 and 3. T still homeless.
Well, creative one says swamp.
Jack Wright says seats.
Gaga Grumps says needs AT creative.
LL Creative One says swamp.
Gaga Grumps says spate is a shout.
Jack Wright says spate.
Gaga Grumps says no plurals in Wordle.
Nope. Jack Wright says swats.
Gaga Grumps says yes for pairs like twins and socks, not regular plurals. Gaga Grumps says I'm not saying it again.
Jack Wright says skate.
Gaga Grumps says no E for skate.
Or Creative One says I think Y is a end.
Gaga Grumps says I know you know better NUFC.
Jack Wright says Swats.
O Creative One says skating.
Gaga Grumps says it is SWAT, but it's not ending in S.
Look Creative One says try a filler with Y at least.
Gaga Grumps says thank you Will. Some common sense.
Jack Wright says Swath.
Gaga Grumps says didn't need a filler creative. I had worked out what it was lol.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Grumps is on the button!
Sunshine Katie says swap.
Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play?
Good
Let
game.
those stickers fly!
Good game.
Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, Benjamin is in the house! Are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game!
Gaga Grumps says Katie in the house.
Gremlins, let's go! Team Gaga, Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps,
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to drop.
Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says I am non-speaking. There is a pinned post on my page explaining.
Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet,
Thanks
grab
for
your
the
daily
follow.
heart while I set up the last grid of the day. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. R. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned?
Gaga
like
Grumps
a
says
thon.
want to steal the starting
Gremlin
word.
renowned
Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with R please Jack.
Jack writes as rough.
Gaga Grumps says rough you got. Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Sarim says slime.
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 Gaga Grumps says bleed fits.
Sarim says slime.
Sunshine Katie says music.
Sarim says speed.
Gaga Grumps says we have a double E.
Lil Creative One says steep.
Sunshine Katie says needy.
Gaga Grumps says no D for speed.
Jack Wright says no D.
Gaga Grumps says steep works.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says from wipeout to fireworks.
Explode 'em on her face, she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3,
Gaga
so
Grumps
gifts
says
explode
Wordle in
with
3.
glee.
Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
As in her face, they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga.
The Creative One says my first solve, lol.
From a single rose to a whole bouquet, anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says fireworks for creative.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Sunshine Katie says well done.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for joining me to play Wordle. I will be back at 4 PM UK tomorrow for more Wordle with Gaga. One says
A
feel.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Ra-ra-ra. Will the fire
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
A random star chosen by fate. Play a part. It's a
Grumps says
life
good
day.
night per day, everyone.
A Wordle with Gaga.